Hi, I'm counselor and eating disorder specialist Dr. Greg Jantz, founder at the center, and this is Hope and Possibility. Well, what's the hope and what's the possibility? Well, the topic is orthorexia. Orthorexia? What is that? It is a fairly common eating disorder. We'll talk about it next here on Hope and Possibility.
Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center, A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole-person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
All right, I used the word orthorexia. Hi, just a little bit of quick history here. 40 years ago, my goodness, amazing. I began working with and treating eating disorders, later became certified as a certified eating disorder counselor, and then later became a certified supervisor of those who treat eating disorders. And I'm still those things today. But my passion was, how do we find a way to help those who are suffering from an eating disorder? And the numbers have grown. Sometimes we think, well, it's just anorexia, self-starvation. We think bulimia. Well, bulimia, binging, usually purging. Maybe it's diuretics. Maybe it's laxatives. But eating disorders come in different forms. The one we're talking about today is pretty common, more common, orthorexia. What is that? Well, it is, and I've made some notes here so we can be sure to cover this. I like to cover quickly. I like to respect people's time and get as much as we can in this, so I'm going to just cruise and share with you what we know about orthorexia. First of all, you're fixated with the quality of food. The quality of the food. You may be in the supermarket and you are looking at labels and you're studying ingredients. You may be looking up right then what a certain ingredient or chemical is, but we become totally fixated, this is at the early stages, on just the quality of the food. It is got to be a certain way, certain quality, sometimes a certain manufacturer, or I have to know, where was this food grown? And what was put on this food? Were there pesticides, etc.? And I've seen folks that go, I won't eat anything that I know that was grown in such and such state, because of perhaps maybe there's a rule or different rules and crops are treated differently. Orthorexia begins with a fixation, and then we become fully engulfed in the thought patterns of what is healthy, and we lose ourselves. What started out as a desire to choose healthy food, I'm going to eat healthy, I want to take care of my body. It started off with really good intentions. But then as time went along, you developed an obsession. And that obsession, you may know somebody like this. The obsession grows deep because it controls their life. You know that you're in trouble if this controls your life, your thought processes, how you eat. It becomes so rigid. And you step in from quality, you go to purity, this has to be pure, and you become so obsessed, it's no longer healthy. Well, in the early 80s, when we started the Center, A Place of Hope, I actually did some experiments. I would go into the grocery store. I love the natural food grocer that we had not far away, and I would frequent that. I was trying to, eat healthy myself and make better choices. And as I began to observe at times, sometimes individuals in the natural foods grocer, my observation was, wow, they spend a lot of time sometimes to make a decision. And I look at them and I go, wow, that person no longer looks healthy. I mean, the vibe coming off that person, they're no longer healthy. And they don't look healthy. Their posture's poor. Their skin doesn't look healthy. They look distressed. They look depressed. They look oppressed by food controlling their life. That's orthorexia. And that's some of the common experiences of that. And you will find, and here's another one to look for, fairly severe emotional turmoil. And if you feel like you made a wrong choice or bad choice, or you found out something about that food and I should have never have eaten it, and it was deficient in magnesium, and now I'm going to have to supplement with magnesium. I can't believe I made that mistake. So guilt, shame, huge shame. And if you also, maybe socially, you might, you go out to dinner, it's almost an impossibility for a waiter to take your order. You will have so many questions and nothing is going to be okay. But let's say you do that and you're out, and then you feel like you've made a mistake, or there was an ingredient in that dish you ordered, or that salmon came, in fact, not from where you thought it might have. That salmon came from probably some highly polluted waters. And these scenarios in your mind and your self-talk, it disables you. You can't make a decision. You can't function. And again, we're talking here about a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. Remember, it's no longer healthy. It's controlling us, and packed into that OCD is enormous amounts of anxiety. You can get paralyzed by that anxiety. And then, here's the danger, you can step over and into anorexia. You end up, no food is safe. It's not safe. And you lose the joy of eating, the joy of cooking, if there ever was joy. And nothing is safe. And so then you really go into a mode of self-starvation. And you lose weight. You find it very difficult to pick any food. And then sometimes you will cut out entire food groups. Okay, all vegetables have had pesticides. All vegetables actually are no longer healthy. They're deficient in vitamins and minerals. I'm not going to eat any vegetables ever again. And then, so you're cutting out entire food groups. And this then will lead you, now you've kind of anorexia, your thought life is so anxiety ridden, and you're so obsessed that it starts to be that nothing's safe. I've seen, we've worked with folks who, I can't even sit at the table and have a meal with somebody who's, I believe, eating unhealthy. I'm almost afraid that's going to come over and infect me. So that's how far the thinking gets, how severe it gets, and you live now in a world that nothing is safe. And even water. I got my water bottle over here. Even water. What's in the water? Well, and you can never get pure enough water. And you may then turn to distilling your water at home, or but to great extremes. So now, this leads us to the next area to look at. It's a constant worry about sickness, a constant worry about disease, and a constant worry about I'm going to get sick, I ate the wrong thing, and then you start to suspect I probably have some celiac, I probably have cancer, and I'm diabetic, and you start to label yourself with different diseases, different health concerns, and in your mind, now here's the danger, you keep going with this, in your mind what happens is you really start to believe it's true, and you may then go into extensive medical testing and blood work, alternative looking at this and that, and the doctor may be concerned your weight and is concerned about your weight and diet, but that's not your concern. Your concern is, and you're convinced, absolutely convinced, that you have a disease. And there are times, though, that our immune system is so strained and our immunity is low, and we end up getting sick. And that self-fulfilling prophecy happens. So you've got lost weight, you have anxiety around so many foods, and here's how this is a different eating disorder. It's not driven by faulty body image. It's not driven at all by I look at myself in the mirror and I'm unhappy and I have to lose weight. I'm never good enough. And then I step into something called orthorexia, and that's not the case. I actually talked to a person once that said, if I could, I would get all my nutrients from the air. And they believed, and they had studied, I could breathe in my nutrition. See how far our thinking gets distorted? And that is really such that it's disabling. And this can move to that direction. So it's much like an addiction. Starts off slow. An addiction, whatever it is, ends up controlling you. An addiction lies to you. You lie to yourself. And you attach nearly an evilness to food and then to people. And you develop a very harsh, critical judgment. It is so critical. It's critical of people. People don't understand. They don't know. I've studied this. I'm smarter. And this is a full-fledged eating disorder. Now, there's not a specific diagnosis, but there are two things we need to look for. Pretty simple to look at. But this kind of emerged. It was a doctor, a professor in Colorado, who first labeled the term orthorexia. Not original, even though we've been working with the eating disorders for 40 years, this is not an original term for us. But Dr. Dunn, I have his name right here. And he said there's two criteria. You compulsively follow and you're obsessed with rules about food that you believe will promote health. You end up not promoting health. And you believe that breaking any of these rules will create a huge fear of disease and anxiety, shame. And as time progresses, the rules get harsher and harsher and harsher. So we end up with malnutrition, severe weight loss usually, lots of relationship issues, lots of medical issues, and you can imagine how this affects you in relationships. You can't eat with anybody, and you don't want to be around people because you're so uncomfortable. And then it happens, you'll start to look in the mirror. And you get really a distorted view of yourself. You're looking unhealthy, but you're believing what you're doing is creating health, and this is the only way to survive. So you see how it robs the brain, the heart, the mind of truth, and takes you down a destructive path. 1992, I believe it was, I wrote a book called Hope, Help, and Healing for Eating Disorders. And this idea back then was never talked about. It wasn't until 2016 that we began to talk about an orthorexia. And let me just give a qualifier. I love healthy and natural foods. 8 years ago, I even acquired a cafe. I know. And it sounds crazy, but I wanted to create a healthy-oriented cafe that leaned more towards healthy food and not over the edge on organic, but we were really, and that we could produce and have healthy food for our clients. And so I'm very interested in this, but I know how far this can go, how far this can take you down a road that you lose track of what truth's in. And again, that's what happens. That's why we're calling this an obsessive compulsive disorder. How do we get better? It's always important to know how to get better. There are times that the depression, anxiety gets so severe that there is times a medical intervention. I know that IV nutrient therapy, so an IV that has nutrients, B vitamins and minerals, and a series of IV nutrition. But it's not an IV with food, it's an IV that's nutritional with nutrients. And this can be very helpful just to begin to turn the brain back on, and you begin to feel a little better. And over time, we get more and more results. But we usually need to work very intensely with somebody that understands an eating disorder, and you're going to need to really get hydration back. You've got to feel good physically. And then you're going to follow up with some emotionally. I'm going to start to feel better. So we're going to do things to help physically. I know it's a slow process. I also know that I've seen folks in an instant through cognitive behavioral therapy, through dialectical behavioral therapy, who come to a sudden awakening. And through prayer therapy, they come to an awakening of the lie and the destruction that they're creating in their body. And that destruction is such that you will find yourself blinded. But an awareness and an awakening goes, oh, wow. And then you become suddenly teachable. Okay, that's happens. But then there's folks that go, I got to rebuild trust slow. I get a lot of anxiety if I can't read the label on the food. I have to trust somebody else with my food. But it's a slow process. And I need to have support while I'm eating. I need to really walk through that anxiety, which will be fairly intense. So now I'm going to add personal belief. I think on a spiritual front, we step into something that is just, it's like it's evil on our body and our mind. And this is why I say prayer therapy can be a big part of recovery. I've seen that for those that would like to have that. I also know that we can have full recovery, and I know there's hope. I know hope comes when I start to build a plan, and I know, okay, I'm going to need to get past, first of all, the 90-day mark. Then I've got to get past the 6-month mark. And then just passing that year of living in recovery. And it's amazing. You will look good. You'll feel vibrant. You'll have energy. Our bodies are so resilient. We don't want to do more destruction to our bodies. But this at times requires an intervention. It gets so severe that we've got to intervene and help people with this. And what I mean by that, we're intervening, they're getting into treatment, and it is a process. Now, it used to be said, well, if you suffer from an eating disorder, you've been a victim of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, maybe emotional abuse, of course, is in there as well. I think you can step into orthorexia. Maybe you've had some early childhood trauma, but you've stepped into this really not knowing it or intending it, and it gets that stronghold in your life. So different reasons why a person leans towards this. Sometimes all the things you see online or in the news could be quite, what, this isn't healthy or this. And there's so much, we get information overload, and then we lose the ability to know and discern what is true and what is not. And so orthorexia, whoa, man, you thrive on, I guess the term right now is misinformation. You thrive on misinformation, and it does create confusion, and confusion creates that anxiety. It gets very intense, and I get depressed, and then my self-care plummets. I've not even mentioned yet sleep, and I used to work in sleep research. Sleep can be an area that is greatly affected because our brain is not getting the nutrients it needs. The gut is not manufacturing appropriate levels of the healthy bacteria, the probiotics, and the probiotics manufacture in our gut, like dopamine and chemicals for our brain, and feeds our brain, and no, our brain's not really being properly fed. And so this is the great ripple effect of stepping into orthorexia. All right, but there's hope. There really is hope. Through the years, we've treated, well, it's thousands now of individuals with various forms of eating disorders. This is pretty common because we're hearing a whole lot of things these days about food, and if we're deep into the media, social media, it gets really confusing. And all of us, actually, I do believe, we want to eat healthy and be healthy, and it's easy to take steps that end up being destructive if obsession enters in. All right, there's hope. Take a look at Hope, Help, and Healing for Eating Disorders. Good to be with you today as we talk about orthorexia, not only for ourselves, but we may know somebody that's stepping over into this direction and suddenly they're becoming way too rigid, and you start to see the joy, the peace, their personality changes, their brain's not getting nutrition, but they believe, and the great lie is that I'm doing the right thing and I'm doing what I have to do. And that is the great lie. The truth is, you can eat healthy and be healthy and have a sound mind.